Less than 2 weeks to make a decision. No sign of a deal yet. I mean, where do we go from here?
It's really hard. I mean, Jeremy is trying to bring people together, and we are trying to see what Parliament can agree on. I mean, the difficulty is that it is also last minute, and the reason for that is because we have been trying to tell the Prime Minister for a couple of years now the sort of things that people could agree about, but she just doesn't listen.
But you need more MPs to compromise, don't you? You're talking about trying to find a solution, a cross-party solution. I mean, you voted or abstained on quite a few different options. Do you think some of your colleagues need to do the same?
I think that people do need to compromise. Of course they do. We do think that what we have been suggesting is an entirely thought out. You know, we've been talking to Europe about it, we've talked to experts about it. What we've said is that we want to be in a customs union, we want to be close to a single market, we need to have dynamic alliance of rules and regulations so that, you know, we can be outside the European Union but not very far. Because we think that the 52-48 actually spoke a central truth, which is that, yes, you know, we do need to leave the European Union. There was a referendum, but we mustn't ignore the 48%, and we need to therefore leave but not go far.
So you're talking there about the fact you want to be in a customs union, you want to be close to the EU. Just explain to me what it is that you have an issue with about the withdrawal agreement. That's the Prime Minister's deal that she put forward to the House of Commons.
I mean, the problem with the withdrawal agreement is, first of all, is that she's set her face so against there being in a customs union.
But there is a customs union in the withdrawal agreement. That's the backstop.
Well, there's the backstop, but the difficulty is with the backstop is that it only applies to part of the United Kingdom and not to all of the United Kingdom.
No, it's the whole United Kingdom would be effectively in a customs arrangement with the EU.
But what we've said is that...
But the backstop doesn't.
But what we need to do is we need to have some... I mean, OK, so she puts forward a suggestion. What you're really saying, aren't you, this morning, is she's put forward this idea that's full of kind of unicorns and rainbows that doesn't make any sense. And the European Union has said, all right, Theresa, if you really insist on this, we'll agree to that, but we want to have an insurance policy. And the insurance policy is not acceptable. What we should do is ditch this and just go, actually, you know, what will work is to be in a customs union and to be close to the single market. And that's how we should have negotiated throughout. She should have listened to Parliament. She should have consulted. Actually, there is some common sense in Parliament. She should have paid some attention to what we've been saying.
So what is it specifically about the withdrawal agreement that Labour won't vote for?
It's because it's so uncertain. It's essentially saying, you know, let's leave, and then whoever is going to be the leader of the Tory party yet, and goodness only knows who it might be, if they remain Prime Minister, what it is that they will negotiate. And we cannot trust them. We can't trust them. And business needs to be sure about where it is that we're going and what it is that we're doing next, which is why, you know, I've said, I did Prime Minister's Questions, I think, 2.5 years ago, and I made it clear in the House of Commons then that on our side of the House, we think that we should be in a customs union. No ifs, no buts, be in a customs union.
I understand that you're saying that you don't know the shape of the future relationship, but that's the EU's fault, isn't it? Because they laid out right at the beginning that you need to sort out the divorce before the future relationship can be sorted. So the divorce is the withdrawal agreement, and I'm still struggling to find out.
No, if you're looking for fault,
what it is.
The fault is
about it that you disagree with.
So the fault is this, right? Is that we have a referendum. People say they want to leave. There has to be another injection of democracy after that. We can't just say we're going to leave and then hand it over to Theresa May and let her do whatever she wants with our country. She ought to have been listening, and there needed to be a democratic input. We said democratic input should be a meaningful vote, and a meaningful vote is something with meaning. It's, you know, come back with your suggestions, Parliament can vote on it. If we don't like it, then you can go away, have a rethink, and go back to Europe and negotiate something with a mandate from the whole of Parliament. But she's been taking the mickey. You know, she should have come back in October. She put it back till November, then December, then January, you know, and then even with just, you know, days to go, she's still saying it's my deal or no deal. And that is not meaningful. That is not democracy. That is Theresa May just stamping her feet and saying, I want this, no one else is allowed to do anything else. No wonder she's in trouble. I mean, she's out of control. You know, she's not listening to anyone. No one knows what it is that she's going to do next. I think her judgment has been undermined. And yet, you know, we don't know whether she's going to remain Prime Minister, if we're going to get somebody else, who that other person is going to be, you know, what the future is. It is a mess. And as I say, all I'm trying to say to you this morning is that we have, as the opposition, been really trying to engage in a way which is helpful, which actually, you know, brings a bit of common sense to the debate.
OK, so, I mean, you're talking there about the need for a meaningful vote. It does feel as if kind of Labour's position is moving towards what you would describe as a meaningful vote, what others may describe as a second referendum. I just want to have a look at something...
Sorry, no, our meaningful vote was come back with your ideas and then get it through Parliament. And Parliament had to have the final say. But because she wasn't prepared to do any, backwards and forwards with us, so she wasn't prepared to listen to us saying, actually, we need to be in a customs union, for her to go, I don't really like a customs union. Are you sure? And actually have a discussion, and then between us, we could come to some form of solution. Now, this is what Jeremy is trying to do now, but this is why we're doing it so much at the last minute, is because until now, we've been blocked from that by a Prime Minister saying, I'm in charge, and it's my way or the highway.
So are you going to call a confidence motion in the Prime Minister then?
We shall see. I mean, obviously, it does look like time may come where we will need to call another confidence motion.
I mean, is it going to be this week? The thing is, you haven't got much time.
I know,
it's 10 days until we leave.
It's a collective decision and not one that I can make on your programme, I'm afraid.
OK. A collective decision, as in around the shadow cabinet table?
It's done by the leadership in consultation with senior members.
OK. Now, we might be in election territory, clearly. What would Labour's position be going into that election? Would it be that we want to leave with a deal, or would it be actually we want to put the whole thing back to the people with a second referendum?
And the principle is, and for the some of the 500,000 people who belong to the Labour Party who are watching this programme this morning, they know that the principle is that they have a say in what our manifesto is. It isn't kind of, as it was with Theresa May's last manifesto, it isn't a couple of people in a back room deciding on what the policy is.
We might have a snap election, though. We have to, I mean,
we had a snap election last time. We've been
negotiating Brexit for years now. Surely we should know what Labour's position would be going into an election.
I can tell you what Labour's position is now, and I can tell you what I would think would be in the manifesto, but I can't be sure because it's not for me to decide. It is for the membership to decide. We have a process.
Would we leave the EU or not?
So what we would need to do is, I mean, we have to abide by the results of the referendum, and so the problem is at the moment we are in a complete deadlock. So the question will be, how do we break the deadlock? Do we break the deadlock by way of being able to agree something in Parliament? If we can't agree something in Parliament, then what do? Do we have a general election, or do we have a popular vote? And these things need to be sorted out because we can't be left.
So would we leave the EU or not under a Labour government?
I think that we're likely to leave the EU, but I think that it is something that we need to agree ourselves. And I think there is a strong argument for asking the people to have the final say on this, particularly since everything is so controversial at this stage.
OK, we can have a look. Your colleague Barry Gardiner said this week the Labour Party is not a Remain party now. Is he right?
We're an internationalist, we're Europeans. I think that it's quite difficult for us to leave the European Union. Most of us campaign to remain. I think in our hearts we want to remain. But the difficulty is that we have to square that with democracy. We're Democrats above everything else. And if the people want us to leave, then we have to leave, and it's been our job to try to make sure that we leave in terms that cause the least amount of damage to jobs and to the economy.
So in your heart, do you want to stay?
Oh, in my heart, I want to stay. I think it's in Britain's interest to remain in the European Union, without a doubt. But actually, what tops everything else to me is democracy. And if the people want us to leave, then, as I say, it's my job as a public servant to try to do as I'm told, and to try to do it in a way which doesn't harm our country. If public opinion has changed, if the public want to remain, then that's obviously a challenge for all of us. And we need to think again about that. Or if we end up in a deadlock, or we end up in a situation where we may be going for no deal, then I think that it's right for us to go to the people and to say, do you want to have, for example, Theresa May's deal or to remain? And in those circumstances, I would obviously be campaigning to remain.
I went down to the Brexit march on Friday, where lots of Leave voters were, just saying how frustrated they were by the fact we weren't leaving on Friday as the Prime Minister had promised. And I spoke to one girl there who was 17 years old. She was standing underneath a suffragette flag, and what she said kind of really stayed with me. So I just want to put to you what she said, if that's OK. She was talking about the suffragettes. They fought for my right to vote, and then I'm here to fight for that vote to be counted. If we don't leave the European Union, democracy is just gone. I mean, there feels like there is going to be a huge crisis of faith in democracy if there's another referendum, if we stay in the EU.
I mean, this is something that we are wrestling with. I mean, I understand that. I mean, the first point, I don't want to make a cheap point, but she wouldn't be able to vote. You know, I mean, she'd be able to vote if I got my way or if Labour got our way. 16-year-olds would be able to vote. And of course, there is an argument that if 16 and 17-year-olds were able to vote, then there would be a much larger proportion of the population wanting to remain than
although
currently.
not that girl.
Because, but although, of course, not hurt that girl. But yes, I mean, I think the whole point has been is that we had a referendum, you know, we got a particular result. I personally don't really understand why 70% of the population at this moment don't want to remain in the European Union, but they don't. I personally think that the reason for that is because we have not had the sort of debate that we need to have. I think that it's been completely disrespectful on both sides, with people just shouting at each other as opposed to just concentrating on the issues and looking at them honestly and saying, really, is this helping our country? Are we getting all the things that were promised during the referendum by the Leavers? Or are we having to compromise so much that if we were to stand back and look at it, is it really in our interest to leave? And I wish that we could have a debate along those lines, but we don't seem to have. And people have got dug in. And, you know, given that people have got dug in and given that public opinion has not changed in such a major way, I can still see the argument for us needing to leave.
Okay. If the deadline is fast approaching, would you be comfortable with a longer extension, taking part in the European elections, if it meant leaving with a deal?
I mean, we have to. It's going to be very. I mean, in practice, I can't see how we can get everything organised in a couple of weeks. I mean, we just need a bit of honesty injected into this. So I think that we will need to extend. I don't personally think that we need to be involved in the European elections. I think that there is a side protocol that can be negotiated.
Are you preparing for the European elections?
Well, yes, obviously we have to make preparations for it, because if that happens, then it happens, and we need to make sure that we stand candidates. But we think that there's another way through this. And we think that if we need to have a longer period of time than currently is on offer, then it can be done. I mean, the process is difficult, but where politics says, yes, we should do it, then actually you can find a way through this process.
OK. Now, while we've got you, I'm just keen to ask about one story that isn't Brexit related, just for
good.
a change. And that is the government's decision to try and potentially increase the number of stop and search that the police are using to try and combat knife crime. 48 people stabbed to death this year alone. Is that something that you welcome?
I think that we need to do everything that we can in order to protect our youngsters. I have lost far too many constituents to knife crime. I write letters to grieving mothers and go around and see them, and it's the worst part of my job. I've had teenagers in my borough brought up. I have worried about them. And we have had times in Islington where everyone has been very scared, and when good kids who wouldn't normally carry knives, for heaven's sake, have started carrying them because they wanted to defend themselves. And we found knives that are hidden in the parks. You know, there are times when anxiety spikes to such an extent and there's a level of hysteria, it needs to be broken. And in those circumstances, the police, I think, do need to have the power to essentially stop everybody. And so long as it is done in a way which is respectful, and where it's explained to people how and why it's being done, then, you know, it's protecting all of us. I mean, one of the times when it was done in my borough, my daughter was stopped. She's a very prickly and difficult individual at times, and I'm surprised she wasn't arrested on the spot. But you know, I mean, they were stopping everybody, and they were being very careful about how they were doing it.
And how did she feel? Was she happy?
She was outraged.
Was she?
She was outraged, and she came home and I explained to her, you know, why it was being done. And that it was there to protect everybody and to make sure that everybody was as safe as they can be. Now, this is not a solution in itself. And of course, if it is not done properly, it can make matters worse, and it can make particular groups feel like they are marginalised and picked on and seen as criminals as they walk down the street, when, you know, the only thing, you know, I mean, it's not done fairly. So it needs to be done fairly, it needs to be done respectfully. And in moments of crisis, I can see the reason for needing to increase the police's powers of stop and search.
OK. Emily Thornberry, thank you very much for being on the programme.